I'll ask the staff to call the roll, please.
Good morning. Nick Fountain.
Here.
Kay Webb.
Here.
Katie Pate.
Here.
Travis Bailey. Ian Dunn.
Here.
Vershay Height.
Here.
Heather, excuse me, Heather Leah.
Here.
Harold Millette is excused. Janine McAuliffe.
Here.
John Reese.
I'm here.
Susan Singer.
I'm here. Here. Good morning.
Gaston Williams.
Here.
Okay, it's great to hear everybody trying out their voice for the first time this morning. Good to see everybody. Sorry we're not doing this in person. Let's see now. First item is to approve the agenda. Are there any changes, additions, deletions from the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda.
All right, thank you for that. Gaston, is there a second to that motion? Janine seconds the motion. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Raise your right hand. Motion carries. Ian and Susan, you need to turn on your camera. And then the next thing is the minutes of the February 16 meeting. Did everyone have a chance to look at those? Any questions, changes? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes. And let's see, John Reese moves to approve the minutes and Janine seconds that motion. And any discussion, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Raise your right hand. All right, thank you. That motion carries unanimously. And the first thing of substance on the agenda today is a rezoning case 314 Martin Luther King Boulevard in the East Raleigh South Park National Register Historic District. I think this matter came up before. I'll ask the staff to catch us up on the background here, and then we'll hear from the applicants and others who may be interested.
Hi, Nick. This is Claire. You can all hear me?
Yes.
Great. So you previously heard this request at the January meeting, and at the time you voted to not support the rezoning application due to the lack of conditions provided related to preservation of the historic house. The applicant has added new conditions, and so we are bringing it back to you to see if you'd like to revote on your support for the application. We have Don Belk, the case planner, here, and several applicants as well.
All right. Thank you for that. We'll call on Mr. Belk if we need him. I'll hear from the applicants in the meantime and let the applicants go through their presentation if they have one, and particularly review the conditions they propose to add here. So let's see. Who among you, Worth Mills, Elizabeth Wilcox, Michael Birch, Nasser Dukes, who wants to lead off?
Good morning, Mr. Fountain. This is Michael Birch with Longwood Law Partners. Good morning.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Appreciate
sir.
the
How about we'll hand the ball to you, and you tell us where we are and what you all are suggesting.
Great. Thank you. We do have a presentation. I think really the relevant slide, given that y'all have seen this before, is probably slide 9, which just includes the language of the new conditions that we have added, which I will touch on. But as we're getting to that slide, I will just remind the commission that this is a request to rezone property from R10 with the South Park NCOD to OX-3. And we are maintaining the NCOD, and we are also applying the urban frontage, urban limited frontage. The purpose of this rezoning case is to allow for the adaptive reuse of this structure for an office use. We were before you all a couple of weeks ago, and in response to the feedback we received, we have proposed some additional conditions related to both kind of the design, in the event that the structure is removed, that there are some conditions that apply going forward, and some of that is related to the kind of architecture and design of any new structure. But before I touch on those conditions, I also just want to acknowledge that it seemed like that maybe the RHDC kind of staff comments and maybe even some of the feedback that we received at the last meeting included a request for a condition, to essentially keep the existing structure. And I just want to emphasize again that while the applicant is not willing to add that condition, because it is really, that would be a condition that would only apply to this structure and no other structure within the South Park area, because it's not a local district, outside of the local landmarks. We have tried to add conditions that don't necessarily incentivize the removal of the existing structure. So in terms of the conditions that we have added, they are there on your screen, really under number 2. The first is that prior to the removal, that the applicant document the existing structure through photographs, elevation drawings, and provide a copy to the RHDC and the State Historic Preservation Office. There's a limitation of 3,500 square feet of non-residential floor area. That is kind of in keeping with the existing size of the structure and the floor area of the accessory structure that's on the property today. Maybe with just a little wriggle room, since there has not been kind of a detailed measurement of all the floor area, but we wanted to keep it in line with what is on the property today. Again, to not incentivize removing the existing structure. No more than 6 dwelling units. And then letter D, that any site plan for new development on the property states that the architectural details of the proposed construction requires a statement of how the proposed building design reflects and acknowledges the historic and architectural character of the contributing structures in that historic district. It essentially, there's that, and then there's the option to, the applicant may provide proof of contractual services for the design of any new construction on the site by an architect certified by the State Historic Preservation Office. And you can kind of read the language there. There's the requirement that the proposed building design is subject to the review and comment by the RHDC staff, and that no building permit can be issued until that report is complete and provided to the owner developer. So those are the conditions that we have added. Again, the intent of the owner applicant is to facilitate the adaptive reuse of this structure for office uses. This structure does front along Martin Luther King Boulevard, which is one of the city's planned bus rapid transit routes. It is in an area designated for essentially more intense development, non-residential development. I think given the kind of state of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in terms of its capacity, transportation capacity, as well as the planned BRT. A single family residential use fronting on that street is not really a viable use, very similar to Hillsborough Street, where you've seen without conditions a number of homes within that historic district convert from residential to office uses. That is what the applicant is trying to do here. We acknowledge we're going through the rezoning process, so we have tried to add conditions that do not incentivize removing that existing structure. And just also remind the commission that with the OX district, if this was used for office uses, that the neighborhood transition standards would really severely limit the size and placement of any new structure. So it really makes it impractical to remove the existing structure and then put a new structure there for an office use. So all of these things, including the retention of the NCOD, is intended to encourage the adaptive reuse of the existing structure. So with that, I think there are a number of folks from the team that are on as well, really here to answer any questions the commission may have. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And if you, Tanya, if you can pull down the conditions for the moment, maybe that'll help Ian. Because I got a note that Ian's having trouble with the bandwidth and the like. So maybe it'll help by pulling down the slide. See if that will do any good. But are there questions of the applicants from anybody on the commission? You all will remember that this is a National Register district, which mainly offers tax credits and the like. It's different from the local district, and so the degree of control, as it were, and the various incentives is totally different in this situation. But are there questions? We voted last time. Gaston Williams has a question.
Yeah, I'm on, right?
Yes, you are.
Just have a question to the proponent. Two questions. I'm not fully in agreement that on the Hillsborough Street corridor, there's an exact analogy because a lot of those buildings were kept. At least the ones in the famous IHOP memorial site, in that area, a lot of those bigger houses and things were on down. A lot of them were kept for reuse and modified, but be that as it may, I have another question. The staff asked on our behalf that you would consider a condition that would address your intent to use the existing structure or not. And specifically on page 2 of their memo, first full paragraph, bullet point, no conditions were included to address that intent to reuse the building. Is that still your position, that you don't wish to include a condition that would express your intent to use the building as it's currently standing before us?
Mr. Birch, do you want to respond to that question?
Yes, sir. So, thank you, Ms. Williams. I'll take your second question first, but I do want to then touch on the first point you made. So I think from a condition that would meet, what staff is requesting, would essentially be a condition that the structure not be removed. I don't know how else, other than what we've already done, which is to put in place parameters that don't incentivize removal of the existing structure by limiting the future development. I think the only other option would be to include a condition that says, the structure shall not be removed. That would be a condition that is really unique to this property, that would not apply to any other structure in the South Park Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District, and really anything outside of the local districts or local landmarks. And so the applicant's not willing to put that condition on there. And then just to your first point about a number of structures on Hillsborough Street being kept, I guess that is what I was trying to say, is that there are no zoning conditions on those properties that require the retention of those structures. And yet they have been rehabilitated and adaptively reused for commercial. And it just so happens that, we are having to go through the rezoning process where a lot of those properties did not have to go through the rezoning process. But I just wanted to reiterate that there's not any conditions that necessarily require the retention of those homes on Hillsborough Street. So.
Thanks for that, Mr. Birch. I think what Mr. Williams was inquiring about was to confirm, did you have a problem putting it on paper that you have no present intention to remove the building? I think that's what you've been saying. You hope to adaptively reuse it, but you don't want to tie your hands with respect to development down the road, which might call for removal of the structure. Am I mistaken about that?
No, that's correct. And we have put that in our rezoning application. That really doesn't lend itself to a zoning condition which functions like a provision of the code. I don't think that there would be an enforceable condition that says it's our intent to do X, but
Okay.
that's just.
I understand that. That. All right. Thank you for that. Are there other questions from members of the commission? Susan Singer.
Thank you. I felt like when you were speaking, and I think I understand your reasons to write the conditions the way you did. And I've recently been looking at other all over the area buildings that have been repurposed, which I completely agree with. I mean, the street would cry out for a repurpose, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it would cry out for a tear down of that structure. And I think what we're trying to say, and this is unfortunately coming at this moment, but I think what I've heard both Nick and Gaston say is that we're trying now to look at these projects a little bit differently, in the sense that it's important to not just say today we're going to own this history, but we're going to own it in perpetuity. And I think that's a request. And I think what you've said in your explanation basically is saying it can't be done in this context. And then I guess the committee, we're allowed to say whether we want to support that or not. But I kind of hear you saying that you're not going to preserve that building necessarily. I mean, an incentive is, I come from the incentive world. Incentives are, just incentives. They don't have to happen or not. So that's, I guess, in black and white, I want to say you're sort of saying no. And this is what you are willing to do. And then we have a decision to make. Is that correct?
I think that's right, Susan. They've expressed what they feel is as far as they can go. The question for us is to assess that and decide what positions we want to take as a body. There are other questions from members of the committee. Ian, if you, since I don't see you, if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and speak up. Otherwise, I'm watching the hands for the others. Anything else? Gaston Williams, unmute yourself.
Quick follow-up. can I ask a question of staff in the context of this issue we just discussed?
Yes, please do.
The question is, down the road, if we vote in favor and they get all the other approvals and do what they're going to do and keep the house, but down the road, if they want to tear it down, how is this discussion memorialized? Is it in writing in a part of your staff reports? In other words, 2 or 3 years from now, someone looking at the history of this process and they want to tear down those buildings and build, three-story whatevers. How does someone find our comments other than looking at the minutes of this meeting? Is it in writing somewhere, staff reports attached to the record that goes forward?
Tanya or Colette, can you respond?
Colette here. This is probably a better question for Dawn to answer. But once City Council approves a rezoning, the conditions that are added are a part of that approval. Where those are stored and found is something Dawn can speak to.
Well, let me ask you this, Colette. How does our action or our minutes and the like, does that wind up in the file? And I'll be glad to call on Mr. Belk, because I think the question is, now that we're taking the time to wrestle with this, 3-5 years later, does anybody even know we did? Mr. Belk, you want to respond to that?
Yes, sir. I'll be happy to. This meeting, of course, in the minutes will be part of RHDC files. Our staff report, we will present our report to the Planning Commission next week, and part of my presentation will be a report of this meeting and what the decision of the RHDC will be. So that will be the only record. It'll be in our project file. We will retain a copy of the meeting minutes and in the case file for this rezoning case. But the important thing are the conditions themselves. As Mr. Birch indicated, these become part of the zoning ordinance that pertains to this parcel exclusively. So this is part of the zoning law that will impact this parcel. The key thing about these conditions, really two things when we are working with applicants that desire to craft conditions, they have to be measurable. It has to be something that can be quantified by an unbiased or uninformed, really, a third party, say, be it an inspector 5 years from now, can open this case, look at the conditions, and be able to interpret it and measure what that condition is trying to do, and also, is it enforceable? And I do believe that Mr. Birch spoke correctly to the fact that intent of a landowner is really not something that can be enforceable. So the meeting minutes will be, part of the case file. We'll report the findings of the RHDC at the Planning Commission meeting, and the conditions, however, will reflect the permanent record for this property.
Okay, thank you for that. Unless there are other questions, Mr. Birch, does anybody else in your group want to be heard, or are they just here to answer questions?
I think that they are here just to answer questions.
Okay.
Do just want to note, in response to Mr. Williams' note, I do want to again emphasize that we are retaining the NCOD, which limits height to essentially 2 stories, and that is just another parameter that we are, in this case, keeping on the property, in addition to the conditions that we are imposing on the property in terms of limiting square footage, limiting density, to, again, not incentivize tearing down the structure.
All right. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, folks. We may as well take a vote here, or come up with a motion. At the last meeting, I think we had a motion that we had adopted. The question, I guess, for us here is, given this additional information, what action do we want to take now? Do we want to entertain a motion to approve the rezoning subject to the conditions that have been offered, or is it the will of this group that you are not content with the conditions offered, and for that reason you're going to vote to oppose the rezoning? It looks to me like we probably need one or the other of those motions, and then see if we get a consensus or take a vote on it. Gaston Williams, you want to try a motion and let's see where we go?
Yeah, my thinking is bogged by my lack of coffee, and I'm making this motion in light of, I'm not, at the end of the day, I think we end up at the same place. So I move that we approve the applicant's request, even though it doesn't have the additional condition that the staff requested. Now you're on mute.
Sorry. Your motion is to approve the request with the conditions that have been offered to this point.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Is there a second to that motion? Let's see who we got. Travis Bailey seconds that motion. Kay Webb, you had your hand up. Did you want to?
No, I was going to second as well. Okay.
All right. Any discussion on the motion?
And my reason is this, and believe me, I would rather have the condition in there. However, there is a portion of the record that indicates in the future that there was a strong preference for retaining the structure and working with it. At the end of the day, I think even without the condition, even if they had the condition in there, they can overcome the condition in the future anyway.
Well, I think, and the other thing I guess I'd point out is that even when we have a local district, we ultimately cannot prohibit tearing down a structure in a local district, let alone a national register district. We can incentivize it, we can encourage it, and in a local district we can delay it for a year. But so that it's a balance that the city has created between the preservation goals and private property rights. And so that's sort of where we are. We don't have to always love what is occurring, but we got to acknowledge the balance in these things. Is there any other discussion before we take a vote? John Reese, unmute yourself.
I want to briefly state in opposition to this proposal, simply because one, we are a body that recommends. We can't stop them completely from tearing the building down, but we can go on record that we do not recommend that it be torn down. I think that's very vital that we as a commission emphasize that when property owners purchase properties in historic districts, be they local or not, really are strongly understood that they need to work with those properties rather than set them up onto a course that, in this case, I personally don't think that no matter how much reinforcement we have from the applicant saying we want to de-incentivize it being torn down, we have cocked the gun for it to be torn down. And in that light, I don't necessarily feel that I can support owners coming into neighborhoods, buying properties that are in historic neighborhoods with the ultimate goal of tearing them down. Bottom line.
Susan Singer.
Thank you. I completely agree. I feel like we have our hands tied in so many regards to protecting the historic property. This is the one stand we can say, I mean, as a commission, we have such little ability, as you said, Nick, to say, you can't do this. There's no rules. We're in this gray area. The only power we have is saying no. And I agree with you. I mean, I just drove through Durham. Those old buildings are preserved. They're beautiful. It makes the city have character and charm. And Martin Luther King is a place where it would be wonderful to at least preserve some of who we are. So thank you for saying what you did.
All right. Heather Lee?
I just wanted to strongly agree with both of them. I think that it is our job at least stand for protecting these buildings, and to do our best to make sure we are at least on record saying that we don't think that these buildings should be destroyed. And I agree about Durham. I think Durham does such a great job preserving their buildings and then reusing buildings for other things, and so they keep their historic character in a way that Raleigh has not done as good of a job in historically. So I just want to agree with them.
Okay, any other comment? All right, I will call for a vote, and I will go down through the list, particularly since I can't see Ian's hand. Anyway, all those in favor of the motion indicate by raising your hand. I'll just call the roll, go down the list the way it appears on my screen. Gaston Williams votes aye. Heather Leah votes no. Janine McAuliffe votes no. Kay Webb.
No.
Katie Webb. Katie Pate, I'm sorry.
No, for me.
John Reese was a no. Susan Singer was a no. Travis Bailey. Is that a yes? Is that an aye? Okay. Rashay Height
No.
and Ian Dunn.
I'm not sure I feel comfortable making a vote since my audio has been cutting out. May have to sit this one out.
Okay. All right. Well, the motion by my inexact tally fails, and I'll entertain another motion. Janine McAuliffe, how about you make a motion?
All right. I move, I'll need a little help with this, but I move that the commission does not approve this application with the conditions offered, and notes that we are supporting that this applicant preserve these properties and adaptively reuse them.
All right. Is there a second to that motion? John Reed seconds the motion. I think if I understand the motion is to oppose the rezoning based on the conditions offered at this point for the reasons that the commission wants a stronger condition with regard to retention and adaptive reuse of the structure.
That's right.
So as stated, is there any discussion on that motion? All right, I'll call for a vote, and I'll go back through the list again with respect to that motion. Gaston Williams.
Aye.
Heather Leah. Aye. Janine McAuliffe. Aye. Kay Webb.
Aye.
Katie Pate.
Aye.
John Reese. Susan Singer. John Reese says aye. Susan Singer says aye. Travis Bailey.
Aye.
Says aye, with some reluctance perhaps. And Rashay Height says aye. And I will support the motion as well, although I'm skeptical as to whether we really made the difference we would like to make in the ultimate outcome of this matter. The next item, but thank you, Mr. Birch, and for all you folks, and we wish you well as you proceed through this process.
Thank you all.
We'll turn now to demolition by neglect. And the status of 419 North Person Street. Staff, can you remind us about this item?
Hello, Tanya Tully here. Sure. Last month, we brought to you the report that Nick and John had done from their investigation of 419 North Person Street, which is actually, I wrote here it's in the Blunt Street Historic District, but actually it's in the Oakwood Historic Overlay District. It's in that rear boundary. I got that wrong. Anyway, the point being, the Society for the Preservation of Historic Oakwood brought this forward as a house that was potentially undergoing demolition by neglect. Y'all did an investigation and report and did see some deficiencies based on the code. Last month, you did decide to defer making a decision and moving forward until you saw what work had happened during this time frame. And so it's back again to see what y'all want to do.
All right. So last month we reported, John and I reported that work was going on, and that we at the time didn't feel the need to move the ball further with regard to our report. I think that's in a nutshell where we were, was to leave it sit because the work was going on. I've not ridden by there to see that the work is still going on. But John, you have comments? All right, then he nods no. My inclination without objection is to carry it forward another month and let's make sure that we go and see that the work is ongoing and the conditions are being remedied. And as long as that happens, then we don't have to kick this to and put the short 30-day timeline to remedy everything that might otherwise be in place. And that's challenging for most any property owner. So if we can get it done without going there, that would be a good thing, I think. And we're accomplishing what the petitioners wanted, I think, if we're getting it done. So without objection, we'll carry that forward another month, staff. The next thing then is the demolition by neglect procedures. And I think the reason for that is that when we have the reason for the question of whether to revamp these procedures is because when the procedures were originally drawn, the assumption was that we would always hear from the Society for Preservation of Historic Oakwood when something came up. But we have a lot more districts now, and not all of them have a neighborhood association on which we can piggyback. So staff has put out an addition with modifications shown by underline and strike through. And I hope everyone's had a chance to see that. With that explanation, I'll call on Tanya or staff to walk us through the procedure.
Sure, Tanya here again. So yes, that's precisely what I did, was just go through the last version of the procedure that y'all adopted back in 2003 and made some modifications. So the first step would be that deteriorated properties would either be identified by a neighborhood or an individual where there's not an active neighborhood association, or for an individual Raleigh Historic Landmark that's not in an HOD. Then the demolition by neglect, what we call an advice letter, would either be sent by the neighborhood or by our HDC at the request of that individual. So, they would have to come to you all to ask. The property owner would be given 6 months to start making, substantive changes, remedying the deficiencies. If they don't do that, then either the neighborhood would reach out to RHDC to let y'all know that the property may be undergoing demolition by neglect. If it's an item that has been brought forward by an individual, staff would be tracking that, and then it would get forwarded to the COA committee. I'm seeing a little bit of a flaw there, sorry, in that as I'm rereading it. A little tweak in the procedure, how that would happen. Anyway, then it would, pretty much proceed as normal. I just struck that you would evaluate based on the prioritization by the neighborhood, since not everyone would be coming from a neighborhood. Y'all, after you make your determination, you would let the neighborhood or the individual know. And then if you do vote that the property is undergoing demolition by neglect, then a petition is made to the Housing and Neighborhoods Department to initiate a case.
So Tanya, I have one question on it.
Yes.
With respect to item, well, first of all, there's a typo in item 1B, of the word individual, but with regard to
there is. Thank you.
With regard to number 3, that makes me wonder about kicking the can down the road in the previous matter we just finished. If your current approach is to give 6 months, but I wonder about that. But secondly, are you suggesting that a property owner can avoid action by simply putting in a nail or two, when maybe what's really needed is to get the property back in line entirely?
Well, right. And the way it has we have set it up thus far is by letting, the neighborhood make the call on what is undergoing demolition by neglect. So no, I'm not suggesting that it would just be a nail or two, but it would be at the discretion of either the neighborhood, or if it is one that y'all are acting on an individual's behalf, you would make the call on whether or not substantial repairs are being made. So someone could have started work and still you make the determination that it is still undergoing demolition by neglect because the work is not happening quickly enough. There's still holes in the roof. It's still, there's still holes in the eaves, that kind of thing. There's a whole long list of about, 8 or so, possible deficiencies that are wrong with the property.
Right. Are there questions from other members of the, John Reese?
Tanya, I appreciate you explaining that a little bit more, because when I read number 3, it sounds as though the neighborhood has to be the one in charge of determining whether substantial work has been done or not. And I appreciate what you clarified, that RHDC would step into that, but the way it's written right now doesn't really seem to emphasize that point very well.
So actually it is written. So if you ignore all the cross outs in the red, and there is, I think I did put in the agenda item, the unmodified, hopefully I put the unmodified version. If it's not in this agenda item, it's in the one just prior. That actually is the intent, that neighborhoods are, in themselves, looking at what's in their neighborhood and making an assessment on, which properties are not being repaired. And then if it's something that they are doing on their own, then they would decide whether or not they would report it to RHDC. So the first 3 steps are happening at the neighborhood level, and you may never hear about it. Now, the only time you get involved is when the neighborhood, right now, the neighborhood writes and says, you know, we contacted this property owner to tell them that there's a problem and nothing is happening, or not enough is happening, then they let us know. What is not clear, I think, in what I intended to say is that for those where an individual has reached out,
Right.
then RHDC would be making the change. So I will tweak that, because
Okay.
if you're asking me questions, then it's not then it's not written clearly enough. So I will try that again.
Right, because that's what I'm seeing
Okay.
right now, is that there's no avenue for an individual. It needs to come from the neighborhood. And since we being a perfect example of not having that neighborhood association that can kind of round everybody up, I'd like to see that be a little more clear to how an individual can reach out to have RHDC solve something that the neighborhood doesn't have the infrastructure to provide.
I have a question. So I was trying to put these in, one procedure. Would it be clearer if I kept the one that exists the same, added, if there's a, in parentheses underneath it or something like that, indicating this is, if there's a neighborhood association, this is the procedure, and then just have a separate procedure for if it's in a landmark or there's no neighborhood association? Do you think that would be clearer?
I think if you just switch it to say, utilize more of the term, the applicant or the petitioner or the complainer, complainant or whatever. The complainant could be the group, the complainant could be an individual. And frankly, Tanya, I don't know, even in Oakwood, whether we, at this point, we ought to prevent an individual from raising the question with regard to a structure in Oakwood, and in case they're not happy with their association, in case they're not active with it, in case the association goes through a stage where it's not particularly effective. But as to your basic question, I think if we just put the language in there where the association or an individual can identify a property perceived to be the subject of deterioration, and then you can probably go either way without having to have two whole documents. But that's just me. Are there questions and comments from everybody else? Anybody else? Janine?
Thank you. I have a question maybe for Tanya, just regarding what the previous case that we just were talking about, where we're sort of waiting for another month to see progress. Is there anything that we want to put in here or ought to or could after step, I guess, 7 now, as far as just monitoring this? Is that sort of on us, or are we sort of done by step 7? I'm just curious.
You could add that as a possibility, as one step. I mean, this is the first instance I've seen where y'all haven't automatically made a determination and sent a petition right away as it came forward. So, really what you've done at this point on this particular case is you're at step 4. And you have not yet done step 5.
So if we were to have gone through step 7, it goes to housing and neighborhoods, and we don't need to sort of shepherd that any longer. Okay.
Correct.
That helps.
Yeah. So if you had made it, if you make a determination that it's undergoing demolition by neglect, then your report and a cover letter gets sent as a petition to housing and neighborhoods, and then they initiate the case. They will set a hearing, they will meet with the property owner, staff will, but then the housing and neighborhood staff do the monitoring from then on out. And the goal is to, work with the applicant to, or work with the property owner for the repairs to actually happen. Typically,
and so what we've done here with the previous case on Person Street is by doing it the way we've done it, we have not started the 6-month clock running. And maybe that's the right way to proceed, since by the time we got there, the people were already taking steps to address matters. And
No,
that
sir.
That may be because they had heard about it from the Oakwood Association.
Yeah.
And weren't waiting.
Yeah.
So they don't get full credit, but on the other end, it's happening. And we've had others where it didn't happen until after we were already in it.
Yeah. Well, that 6-month waiting period has already happened. Oakwood, the Society for the Preservation of Historic Oakwood reached out to the property owners. Nothing happened, so they reached out to you all.
Okay, so the 6-month thing is not based upon our action.
Correct.
But we nevertheless have the ultimate control of whether to send it to enforcement or not.
Correct. Per the code, only RHDC can make that petition.
And I think that's healthy. That's the way that needs to be, so that a property owner doesn't become subject of a neighborhood fight of some kind. All right, Gaston Williams had a question.
Well, it far be it from a lawyer to suggest you use more words, but I do think the draft as I'm reading it, probably could be more understandable. We need a few more words. And as an example would be, Tanya, in the paragraph 1, deteriorated properties are identified by neighborhood, and it's neighborhood something, you need to define it, neighborhood associations, or an individual where there is no neighborhood association. In other words, a few more of those connectors.
All right, so I think what we'll do here is we won't act on this today. We'll get, if there are any other comments or suggestions, then we will let staff tweak this based on the things that staff already saw and the things that we have brought up. Rashay, hi.
Yeah, I just have, I guess, one more comment piggybacking off of what Gaston mentioned. I would agree. It's unclear as to whether some of these A and B list type things are or type moments or and. So I think clarity as we kind of read through would be helpful with that. Also, back to John's point about this being separate documents, I was trying to discern whether, depending on who starts it and where it goes, do we end up at the same place? And based on the strike throughs, it looks like maybe it didn't go to housing and neighborhoods originally when the HOA was making voicing their concern. But now that we're introducing an individual, the process kind of lands in this housing and neighborhoods department. So just, again, if it ends up in the same place as far as the way it's handled procedurally, I think that this can be one document. But if there's something about who proposes in the process that triggers it landing in one place or another, by the time you get to point 7 or 5 or whatever it is, then maybe the documents do need to be separate.
Okay, I will clarify that. I think one of the issues is also that the department, the department that handles these cases moved since 2003 and changed names. So that's part of the confusion, I think. But I will try again. Is there anyone that would be interested in looking at a draft that I can send out via email prior to next month? I see Gaston.
Gaston Williams has volunteered.
Anybody else? I see
Katie's
Katie.
volunteered. John Reese put up his hand.
Okay, I didn't see that.
Rashay,
All right.
got plenty of offers.
Okay, I will send out a revised version in Word that y'all can monkey around with. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so we'll move on to follow-up items, and the first one is, or the only one is status on rezoning cases. And so staff, tell me what is that about?
Colette here. So there are a number of of rezoning applications set for the April 6th City Council agenda that you have recently heard. I do not have that list directly in front of me, but I believe Bloodworth, the 507, 511, 513 Bloodworth case is among those to be discussed. Wait one moment, I can pull the other one. I believe it's the Morgan Street.
Okay.
Yeah, the 500 block of South Blood, while she's looking that up, Bloodworth Street case has gone to the Planning Commission, and they recommended, they're recommending denial of that. A public hearing has been scheduled for that for the first City Council meeting in April, and the along with the Pine Street Creamery case is also scheduled for public hearing. Anyway, the intent of this is to just let y'all know what's happening on the cases, so you don't make your vote and then they disappear forever. You can see what happens, and also in the off chance that you wanted to, add additional response to send to City Council, you'll have the opportunity to do that. And while she pulls that up, if we want to move on to the next one, we can do that.
So we could, but we could decide on one of these or any of these or any one in the future that we remain sufficiently concerned about the particular resource or whatever that we want to add additional commentary and forward it to council. And I think that would be possible. Anyway, while she's pulling up the list, let's talk about the work program. Tanya, that came out, I think that came out of the retreat, right?
Yes, and it was attached to the email for the meeting.
Yes. Did y'all look at the list of things? If we do all of those, it would have been a heck of a year. But the main thing is that the work plan carried forward the things that were expressed as priorities, and a few things perhaps that we didn't talk about directly, but definitely needed to be on there. Are there questions or comments about the work plan? Now, Tanya, procedurally, what are next steps on the work program? Okay.
Well, first thing is I did want to note that this actually will kind of covers 2 years, the fiscal year that's already ongoing, and then it would cover through next year, so through June 30 of 2022. So work that you've already started. The work program does need to get approved and approved by City Council. And typically we wrap the work program in with your annual report to City Council at the same time. But I wanted to go ahead and get this in front of you to discuss, make sure that everything you want is on there before pulling together the actual report.
All right, and so in a non-pandemic year, when would we usually be taking this to council?
Ideally, you would be taking it in, somewhere between May and July or August of each year. It's kind of varied.
So it's supposed to be, it is intended to be what you propose to do and to get it to them before the fiscal year begins or around that time.
Correct. Okay.
So this is a plan with respect to what we propose to do in the next fiscal year, but also what we have been doing because it didn't happen last year.
Right. And you're not the only commission in this situation.
Right. Are there questions with regard to the work plan? Gaston Williams.
Real quick, in light of the discussions we've had about the website and social media things, issues, it's on there. I don't see it. And I think it probably should be put in there somewhere.
It is. It's under Community Awareness Committee to update the RHDC website for improved customer engagement. One thing that I did a little bit differently that I'm proposing is this idea of focus areas that sort of lets you and city council know sort of where the various initiatives fit into. And, you know, with community engagement being number one, African American history and the built environment being number two. And then I just put number three as being homeowner retention, and I put a question mark by that because I'm not sure that's the best word, but that is the study of the new preservation fund. That's what that would fit in under. So if you have some better idea of what that third focus area would be, that was my thinking behind that.
Okay. Other comments? Yeah, I guess we could call it structure retention or something like that, perhaps, Tanya. John Reese.
Tanya, can you just go into a little bit more about what you described about homeowner retention? Just give me a little bit more background on what your intent.
Sure. So that came out of, gosh, a couple years ago now. I think it was in May of 2019. The Historic Preservation Toolkit that was prepared by the Planning Department was adopted by RHDC, and then y'all took it to City Council for their adoption as well. And it has a number of various, possible tools for historic preservation in Raleigh. And from that, at that time, the commission made the observation that, one of the, ongoing challenges in Raleigh is, folks being able to stay in their homes, small businesses being able to stay in their buildings, and there not being a loan or grant fund that is, targeted for that purpose. And so RHDC, asked permission of City Council to look into that, either expanding the existing loan fund or creating a new one. And so that is where that's where that came from. And we've just not gotten to doing that. Now, I don't want to jinx it, but I'm going to knock on wood. I'm meeting with someone right after this meeting today. We may have a college summer intern who will help us, get really started on this and move forward.
I guess my thought is to try to be more specific rather than a somewhat veiled term that I think we need to stress the need for those funds to either develop through the loan fund or through the city processes or private money if we can get it. And we need to be specific and put that need out there, particularly when we're coming up on election season. There was a lot of discussion about affordable housing, and I'm not sure how much has actually happened as a result of that last election campaign, but we want to highlight that, and we need those tools because here we are with our funds largely tied up in the Lustron, and meantime there are other things probably not getting done. Susan Singer had her hand up.
Thanks. I agree with you. I feel like not only do we need to be a little more specific, but have you ever done anything where you actually put some accountability in, like some percentage of funds being spent for this effort, because I think one of the great challenges, at least in my short tenure with this committee, is on providing help to people who want to be able to protect and preserve the history of their family or the history of the home or the history of the business. And if we can create some funds for that, that would be extraordinary, but also putting some accountability around it, because just saying you want to do something doesn't necessarily mean it happens. So just suggesting maybe there's some percentage, obviously can't put a dollar amount, but in our fund allocation, can X% be accommodated for that purpose or something like that?
That would probably need some more to be looked at by committee to figure what to do next with that. I do think that with regard to this work plan, everyone is on one or more committees, and this becomes a little bit of your to-do list for your committee. And so we need to think about it from that context as well. Are there other discussion or comments? Do you is it the consensus that with these comments we will let staff tinker with it a little bit, and then we'll take action on it for sure at the next meeting? That would put us on track to get to the city council on a timely basis. John Reese.
Yeah, I think that the tweaking in number 3 on that focus area, Tanya, is specifically related to financial assistance at some level. I mean, it sounds to me like whatever homeowner retention has been discussed, at least in the explanation and in terms of what the goal is, it's money related incentives in some regard and I think to be specific in that realm versus just homeowner retention, I think will be a little bit more clear as to what we're trying to focus on relative to keeping people where they need to be.
Thank you. That actually, that's super helpful. I just changed the document. And to your comment, I think it was Susan, or maybe some others, about needing some, yours, Nick, about needing more words. There will definitely, once before this gets to council, an explanation of your intent and how this fits into your mission. The point of this was to, okay, these are the list of things. Are you on board? You know, for staff to flesh it out and move forward. So,
okay. All right, good. So we got the feedback that the staff was looking for on that. So let's go to committee reports, and I will call on Kay Webb. Kay, you want to talk about where are you on nominations at this point?
Okay, yes, the nominations committee is receiving in letters of intent and interest. We have a number of people who have expressed interest. We are in the process of requesting additional information from several of them. Most of them have responded back with the more detailed information. And so we're moving forward with trying to select 2 persons to recommend to come on board on July 1. Also, we will be prepared to present a slate of officers in April, which will be elected in May.
Right. And I will say we have more people affirmatively expressing interest in a position on this commission than in any year that I can recall. And so we are thinking about forwarding more than 2 names to the city, trying to be sure that we have, and I'm on that committee along with Kay. We're looking at what skill sets do we need for the COA process, what skill sets we need elsewhere. And we're thinking that with so many persons who are interested, some of them are design people, some of them are realtors. There are a variety, and some of these are people who just have a genuine interest in history, I suppose. We think we can take some of these names and add some of them to the various committees, and that would give us a year to find out, will they really show up? Will they really do any work? And so that, but we have a resource that will allow us to add a couple people to each of the committees. I think that's a good thing. And so just so that the committee is not struggling at this point. We've got numbers of people, like a dozen, and where there are other times we've sort of had to scramble and scratch our heads and comb through the neighborhoods to find what we need. But we're doing okay. So, but that's where we are, and that'll all happen next month on the officers, and I guess we'll stay on roughly that track for the nominations of new people, though that can be pushed off probably till May, if I'm not mistaken. John Reese, did you have a comment?
If we have someone in mind that would be a good fit, or that we think would be a good fit, do we just tell them to apply, or do we offer their names to you guys in some way?
We put out a notice, and the notice had a deadline of March 8th for them to submit if they wanted to be considered. That said, if you had somebody that could do what they need to do right now, I don't want to be unfair to the people who played by the rules and turned it in. But on the other hand, if there's somebody really good, let's hear it, but real quick.
John Zellweger.
If you get an email from him, send it to Kay.
Okay.
And there's more paper. There's more paperwork associated with it, like a resume.
Yeah.
An expression of interest and those kinds of things.
Okay.
And then the committee will look at the question of whether to sort of reopen discussions or where are we on it. But at the last meeting, Kay took hold and reached out to 3 or 4 of them that we need the rest of the material on, to give them, but also that would help us to know that they were still actively interested and they might be good on a committee.
Great, thank you.
That's what's going on. All right, thanks. Research, Ian, you got a report? Good to see your face, Ian, by the way. Been in and out some today.
Thanks. Sorry, I was having some technical issues earlier. The research committee is moving closer to sending out letters to owners of potential landmarks. We have selected 13 properties to send letters to. If anybody wants to see those 13 properties, a list of them, I'm willing to send you that list. We are also working to update Raleigh's African American architectural survey, focusing on years 1938 to 1971. In order to do that, we need to apply for an Historic Preservation Fund grant through SHPO. So with that, I have a motion for the committee. On behalf of the research committee, I move that staff apply for a Historic Preservation Fund grant through State Historic Preservation Office to update Raleigh's architectural survey with a focus on African American history.
That motion coming from the committee doesn't require a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your hand. I see all the hands up. The motion carries unanimously. And so thank you, Ian. That's good work on that. Anything else for the research committee?
That's it.
All right, thank you. Let's see, community awareness. Heather, is that you?
Yes, it's me. So things are going really well. Our social media numbers continue to grow. We continue to get more followers. And we have a lot of posts that are educational and help engage the community, their local history. They continue to draw engagement. So things are going well on that. The big thing we're working on is our scavenger hunt. It's our Raleigh Historic Scavenger Hunt. We are working with 5 local businesses that happen to be in historic landmarks. So for the last week of the month, and we're actually just now starting to promote this on social media, those businesses are going to have basically swag bags from our community. Each of them are going to get about 80 swag bags. So we have a lot of swag bag stuffing to do. Anybody wants to volunteer to help with that or to help with delivering the goodies to the locations. And we designed basically like a collectible baseball card style card for each of these historic landmarks. So it'll actually be like a limited edition collectible, and we could repeat this again and again with any number of historic landmarks that have businesses in them. And the idea is to draw people back into downtown to support these local businesses. When they go to these businesses, they will automatically get this collectible card as well as a little bag of RHDC branded goodies. And hopefully we'll encourage people to go out, visit these 5 locations, get some lunch there or some coffee there. And then it also, of course, helps them learn about the historic buildings that they're walking into every day and don't even know the story behind it. It's also a social media campaign because it's going to allow all of these local businesses that are working with us. We're making posts about them on social to help promote them and the history of the building they're in. Then they will share those posts onto their social medias, which will allow RHDC to kind of gain access to their followers and hopefully draw some of that traffic back to us as well. So hopefully it's going to be a good benefit for everyone. And we are on the final stretch of that. I believe we are printing the cards today. So, yeah, we do help with stuffing the bags and delivering if anybody wants to help with that.
Okay, do you want to set a time or a place for a work session for anybody that can show up and help get that done? Do you want to send out an email after you figure that out?
I'll do that. I'll send an email because it's going to just depend on, I think, when people are motivated to do it. We're very flexible as long as it's got to be before the week. So it'll be this week. Yeah. But I'll send an email out and then anyone can respond and we can come up with a time that works for everybody.
Okay, great. Well, I think it's just really impressive, and I think it is working, and I think that it may be connected to the additional interest with nominations that we've had as well. So all these things may be feeding on each other, and of course, it may be some fallout from your hidden history work too. I'm not sure, but all of it is drawing some additional attention, I think, and that's part of our goal as well. Brashay Height, you had a hand up.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I think it's for Heather with community awareness. I have a couple people, or maybe a handful of people, that have reached out about wanting. I know we have the kind of virtual tour online, but is there somebody who does potentially like smaller, I guess, guided tours of historic Raleigh that can tap on and say, hey, I have a group who's interested in learning about this? You know, do we have that?
I think I would get hold of Ernie Dollar at the City Museum as a starting place, and in addition to whatever Heather has got, because Ernie does that kind of outreach, and he's similarly motivated to get people back to the museum and get people back downtown. Heather, what were you going to say?
Yeah, actually, I met a couple of weeks ago, and he's definitely motivated downtown. It helped encourage the work we're currently doing too, and trying to bring people into downtown. So there is kind of an overall movement towards that. But actually, I think that's a good question. As far as RHDC, before the pandemic, we did have a tour that we were going to offer. And we were putting it together and it was really coming along, and then the pandemic just canceled the whole thing. But I actually think we're discussing if RHDC could offer maybe a monthly tour You know, if we had a volunteer do it, I mean, I'm happy to do it, but I'd like to offer that opportunity to other people too. So I think we could collaborate with Ernie or even with like Friends of Oberlin or other groups that are already doing tours. But it also might be a good idea, now that you mention it, if we offered our own RHDC tour. That might be something worth looking into.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
would,
I just,
I think that
again, the request is,
I'm sorry, Verche, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I think I'm having like my internet is stuttering a little bit, so I apologize for that. But yeah, you know, particularly, for example, I have a group of, 11 students that we have a site for our design studio, and it's based around East Hargett Street for historic reasons, right? And so anyway, I would love to, knowing that there are other professors we teach out of Raleigh and things like that, knowing that we could kind of like tap on someone through RHDC, even if it's like that focused parts of Raleigh, and maybe not always slotting into like something that's scheduled monthly, but even also the opportunity to just like say, hey, I have this going on. Can we work on a date and get something set up to teach these groups or the specific entity about some of this history in Raleigh? I think that would be helpful for me.
Okay, Susan.
Thanks. I love this idea. And I think I've been involved with the Contemporary Art Museum, and they have a docent program. And also NCMA has a docent program. I think that this could potentially, and Heather, to all the work you've done to bring awareness to the RHDC, this is another aspect. We could build a program where there are potentially docents who lead these historic tours. And once we frame the tour, it can be a continuation of awareness for RHDC. We lead groups, we become part of the awareness community. And at some point, Heather, if you want to sit down and talk further about it, I would love to see RHDC take ownership of historic tour of downtown on an ongoing basis for students, for visitors, for a whole host of people. And I think it's a great role for us to play and build awareness for us.
I agree. I think we should have that conversation. Let's do that.
I think we will refer that item to the Community Awareness Committee, but I'll remind committee that it will take the volunteers, and it will have to be a virtually and almost entirely volunteer effort, because I don't see staff sitting around on their hands wondering what to do. And so it may be, if you got it off the ground and it worked, it might be that we would ultimately get staff support through the city council because of what it was doing generally for downtown development or otherwise. So,
well, let me real quick. Let me say one thing real quick. Obviously, there was a time before the pandemic where I offered weekly tours. Now these were paid tours through a company, but they filled up every time. We could carry about 30 people. So once a week, 30 people would just sign up. And then during October, I mean, it was even more. We couldn't keep the seats, rotating fast enough. So I'm not doing that anymore, but that does leave a big opening, and I know that there's hunger for it. So there's definitely an audience. If we could get it off the ground, and I agree, it would have to be volunteer, and maybe we start slow. But I do know the audience is there, and they really want that kind of thing. And RHDC, it would be a great role for us. So we'll talk about it in committee. And Susan,
that sounds great. That sounds great. And Verche, I will say that we've had special events where your design people came to our house and we've had also continuing ed credit for design people, because they wanted to get credit and do it that way. So if you are interested, since we got two mid-century moderns next door to each other, if you want to do that, take that tack, as well as the downtown stuff. It's out there if you ever wanted to. So Lustron. We'll switch to the Lustron House, and it is moving at a glacial pace. We've been meeting roughly every 2 weeks, and the status is that the material, we think, is now actually moved to the site, the rest of the parts, and I'm on track to get hold of the key, and it was left to me to get one of the metal planks out of there and take it to an auto body shop to see about repair and rehabilitation and getting those repairs done, because essentially we're dealing, it's just like painting a car. So, and our builder person came up with that idea, and I had come up with it independently. And so we're tracking that way right now. In the meantime, we still got a hot prospect, but it is, but we don't have a firm offer because we're trying to figure out what all the components and costs would be. So, Tanya, anything else from staff on the Lustron House?
Nothing substantial, no.
Okay. All right. COA is meeting and has plenty to do, and I am interested on that point, Tanya, as to whether have we had any of the ones where people are not getting what they want? Have we had any to launch a rezoning effort, to your knowledge?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. Anyway, so there's plenty of activity at COA, and but the same is true of every committee. So Dix Park, staff, Tanya, can you help me on where are we on Dix Park?
I think Aaron is the keeper of that knowledge.
All right, Aaron, what resides in your head at the moment?
Well, she may be having technological issues. Oh, she needs help with the mute button.
I'm here. Lee got me.
Oh, there we go.
So we are working on scheduling our next meeting for early April. We had met in mid-February and decided that whenever we met again, we needed some key members of the committee to be there to make some decisions. So we've got a couple of dates nailed down, and based on everyone's availability, we'll schedule that by the end of this week. There's not too much to report yet. We're just keeping tabs on it. The Plaza and Play portion of the design for the Gateway area over on Lake Wheeler is moving forward with design review. We're hoping that the committee can get involved in some of the work over there in terms of historical interpretation in the area, and then just making sure that we're available in the future. It sounds like they will be using volunteer groups like the RHDC to get some of the planning done as they move forward. So we're hopeful to be there and help with that.
Right. So their focus is that piece over by Lake Wheeler Road at the moment, that piece. And then there was previous to that, y'all, I'm sure, saw about putting in a pond and a redesign down by Western Boulevard on the other edge. So far, at that and the chapel, the adaptive reuse of the chapel is now virtually complete, and that's going on. But so there, and then there's the question still about when will the state pull the plug and suddenly be gone, and that may happen sooner rather than later. And so that's going on as well. Okay. All right. So now we're down to other business. If there's anybody on the line that wants to make a public comment, we built a space in here for that. We were not placed on notice there was such person. Anything from commissioners that needs to be reported or shared otherwise? Staff? Okay.
Sorry, I had one quick thing. I think I mentioned last time when we talked about and maybe this was more with regard to COA, but when some of the buildings, when we talk about documenting, potentially providing a resource to make that more consistent. I did reach out to a student organization at NC State, and they said that, they'd be willing to have a conversation about how they could help. So anyway, I don't know where we go from here with that, but we do have some people willing to kind of help us out if the desire, is there.
Now, let's see, Rashay, does that, in terms of documentation, is that a better fit under research? Is the right place to
I don't,
link that?
I'm not sure. That would be, I guess, up to Ian to kind of let us know. I know that the comment comes out of when we talk about conditions for the owner, when they're proposing redeveloping these properties and taking down some of these structures, and we ask that they go through and do that kind of photography and any drawing or effectively documenting those structures for our historical purposes. So, and having some consistency across. Ian, what do you think?
Yeah, I do think that, and the reason I thought about Ian is because he did such a good job trying to document over by St. Aug's on that house before it got gone, but a little bit of consistency about what that process entails and what we're expecting would be good, and maybe a little bit, maybe some sort of a protocol, a little bit like we have on the demo by neglect, as to how that works, and maybe we reduce that to something on paper so we all know how that happens when we do it, and we don't have to dream it up on the fly each time. If Ian, if you comment on that, and then we can talk about it in the exec committee and handle it that way. I don't know if we need, you got a lot on you already.
I think that might be more of a general committee issue than specifically research.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to help with it.
All right, great. Okay, anything else? We've got, we need to note the important reminders there at the bottom on things we need to look at. And I remind everybody to look at those things. John Reese, anything else?
I just wanted to follow up with Rashay a little bit in terms of engaging the NC State students. If Ian, if you happen to have an example of a well-documented research project where you feel like this thing really does say what it needs to say, pass that over to Rashay, who can then take it to NC State and say, this is the example. If you guys create a project or a class that focuses on documentation of historic properties, or even in a historic property class of some sort, this is the kind of documentation we're looking at to try to really do a good job, or at least gives them a starting point for them to be able to create a list of their own, which they feel adds to that. And so it can come back to us even as a better, it's just a way to kind of get the ball rolling.
And I think staff could help on that as well, as terms of feeding material that is useful to Rashay. And surely there's material that we've had through the PNC conference and otherwise, or the national meetings on really good examples. If we're going to share something, let's make it be a real good one.
Tanya here. I've got a question, if that's all right.
Okay, go ahead.
I just was wondering, Rashay, if what you were looking at was possibly having the students be a resource for property owners, that whether they are needing to do recordation because they're demolishing a building through the COA process or through the rezoning, that they would then be able to go to this contact at NC State and say, I've got a building that needs to be documented, that they could go to them. Is that part of what you're looking at?
Yes, that is,
okay.
That is what I'm looking at. Because
Okay.
the way I understand it is when we give them those kind of conditions, they sort of find someone or use their own resources, I guess, and maybe there's a little bit of inconsistency in the quality or the level of detail. So yes, we could say we want you to do this, and here's this resource that you can use in order to make sure it's done effectively and to meet our requirements as our agency.
So we would need to come up with requirements and then also then be able to connect with the right people at NC State. So however, wherever you want to put that, Nick, staff definitely should be in the loop, and we can help.
Yeah, we would want staff in the loop. For now, we'll put it in the executive committee, and we'll wrestle with how to do it. I don't know that we have to have a set requirements, but if we have good examples then and that have worked, then people will probably rely on that, whether we went through creation of specific requirements or not. But anyway, let's put that and add that to the exec committee, and we'll just talk about it there as functioning as sort of a committee of the whole, and that we'll work on in the exec committee. So, okay, unless there's something else, folks. 9:20. But we've done a lot of good with it, and we will see you all next month, and probably see you at some committee meetings between now and then. And maybe the day will come when we will get back to having live meetings, but no, we're not quite there. Go get your shot, folks. It won't hurt. And there was a survey came out that something like virtually half of the males in America say they're not getting the shot, which is not saying much for my gender, I must say. But anyway, let's get them done and get back to something approaching normal life. So promote the shot everywhere you go. By the way, everyone in this firm has now been cleared to go get the shot. So it's happening up and down the roster, regardless of age group. You just got to find your way through the red tape to get it done. Take care, everybody. Bye now. Meeting adjourned.